Good evening on your Saturday. I'm forecaster Andrew Fleck for Analyst Weathercast, just doing a rainstorm update, and I think it's safe to say that we should be declared into storm mode because the rain is now over western Pennsylvania, entering now central Pennsylvania, and by overnight into Sunday, especially during the later hours on Sunday, the heaviest rain will mark its presence across the green highlighted area. This is not the area that's under the flood watch, but the area that I declared to be under the potential for flooding during and after this event when everything begins to crest at its highest. Earlier today I was up across northeastern Pennsylvania. I was doing some observations on some of the tributaries and the creeks, and what I found a bit disturbing was how much the snow that's still up there is causing a problem for some of the tributaries, such as the lakes that flow into the creeks. Basically, there was a sheet of ice, a very thin sheet of ice over the tributaries of these lakes, and that was causing a very slow flow from these lakes into the creeks, and that was making things look very swollen. And my first worry on that is that when we get heavy rain, a very quick heavy rain of 1 to 2 inches on top of that, that's already swollen, flowing into the creek, that could be a huge problem without even a doubt. That would then eventually, when the creeks go high and probably double the height because of that, then that would flow into the rivers and cause the rivers to go up even quicker. So the more swollen tributary you have, the double the rise and the quicker amount of that rise could occur over some of those creeks. Of course, depending on if jamming of the tributaries and creeks does take place, that's when things will slow down. But knowing that some of those tributaries upstream are swollen and that type of deal, that's a big problem in itself right now. I also was able to go a little downstream into some of the creeks where the tributaries then run off into, and some of these creeks along the banks, there's still snow there. So if we get heavy rain falling with that snow that's still along those banks, that's double runoff into those creeks. So a swollen tributary running into the creeks, and then along the creeks, that double runoff from some of that snow, there's a double problem there. And I sure hope some of the forecasters are watching that along the Hall area, because that just might be something that isn't solemnly put into the flooding forecast, and so on and so forth. Looking at the snow cover here, again, I was up across the northeastern portions of PA today, so I was in this area here, and again what I was able to see was a lot of the tributaries having a thin sheet of ice on them, causing the lakes and such to be more swollen, and there was a lot of snow cover along the creek's banks. So a bit of concern is what I observed there, especially if we're talking about a good 1 to 2.5 inches of rain to be falling. Last but not least here, I'm going to show you a few scenarios by looking at a Google's map, and there's two weather models that are a little different with this event right now. The one is the NAM, which supports more flooding over the western Delaware and Susquehanna, and there's the GFS, which supports most of the flooding over the Delaware Basin. Both equal out to probably a minor to flood stage for some of the rivers, but at different time frames and different areas. Let me explain why. The NAM model basically again supports areas in here, the Susquehanna, around this entire area here. And what I do want to explain is that the heaviest rain will be falling into this area. Okay, so not eastern PA, but in just a little more west. Now here's the thing that I do want to throw out there, because there are some areas that are forecasted in their 48-hour to go to flood stage just below Easton, so in the areas of Bucks County and those areas down there. And this could be because maybe the forecasting institutions are going with this track, and that would cause a lot of this rain to fall into these areas here. And this is one base area that brings water down into the Lehigh. Okay, and then that's when we have areas like Stockton and down and more south as we go, seeing that threat. But if the GFS model is right, what happens is you get all this rain being up across the Delaware Basin. So now what you're getting is the flooding beginning over northeastern Pennsylvania, then down across Belvedere, across Easton, Stockton, and then so down and so forth, more south down to then Trenton. So there's two weather models that differentiate to whether a more western track or a more eastern track with that rain. But what I will say, though, is that whether you slice or dice it, you do have probably your worst concern, if we're talking about the Delaware, being probably from Easton and southward as of right now. Of course, that's because if you get the NAMS track, which has the heaviest rains up here, you would still have it across the western Delaware Basin, and that would go into Lehigh, then forcing that flow then from Easton and southward. But if you get the GFS would have the whole area here under heavy rain, and you wouldn't have to worry about just one area from the Lehigh and south flooding, but also the Hall Basin from northeast PA, Belvedere, Easton, and then southward flooding. So it all depends on that track. I know that the NAM was actually becoming incorrect currently on the radar. The precipitation's a little more east, not by a lot, but it might go more with that European track and the GFS track. They both agree that the Delaware River Basin would get the predominant heaviest rain, so I do worry that that would be the correct model. And again, if that's the case, then areas from northeast PA and really the Hall Basin gets into a heck of a creek flooding, as well as the possibilities for some river flooding. I don't want to go and point out any areas yet, but we'll be definitely monitoring that as the event goes on. We want to see where the precipitation is, where the heaviest, those sort of things. But I do think for the Delaware River, the worst case scenario would be where I was, up in northeast PA, hitting that 2.5 to 3 inches of rain. That would just be the worst case scenario out of it all. I do believe that. But if the NAM track is right, where the rain is more west, then areas from Easton, Lehigh, and southward would need to watch. And then that area over northeast PA would make out okay. But we're going to find this out and figure out what happens as the time frame goes on overnight and into Sunday. You can bet I'm going to be on this. You can bet that I will be giving you the best updates overnight, all night, if I have to make sure that you guys are safe and are up and willing in case any emergency evacuations are needed to take place. So I am Forecaster Fleck for Saturday night's update. I look to maybe have one early and very early Sunday, or another one much later tonight. Again, I am in storm mode myself, so I will be giving you every update I possibly can. Have a great evening, and we will talk to you soon.